time out here on the west coast of the U.S. is about a quarter until 11 p.m. on Monday, January 7, 2013. This is episode number 3049. Now, I have on the phone with me an individual I call PA. He's from Port Angeles, Washington, and this is a kind of a re-recording of a bad recording that we got last time. The quality wasn't so good, and this is fairly well scripted. And PA, how are you tonight?
I'm all right.
All right. Now, once again, I'm asking you to speak directly into the microphone.
Okay.
For the best quality audio that we can get. So now you're a targeted individual, and how did you come to know this?
I came to know it from a series of strange events about 4 years ago now.
Can you elaborate on the type of strange event that occurred in this series?
I got routinely followed, obviously enough to where, even if I didn't want to notice, I noticed.
They wanted you to know. They were doing it on purpose, and they wanted you to know, or what's your take?
Yes, they'd follow me in their vehicles. They'd follow me on foot. They'd make weird comments.
Directed conversation, like what? What sorts of weird comments?
Oh, just comments about things that I'd said at home or on the phone that they couldn't have known unless they were listening. And
okay. And how else? Go ahead.
I can't remember exactly what they were, but they were. It was undeniable that I was being listened to, and I couldn't deny it. And so I was, kind of thrown. I'd look for cameras and I'd look for microphones and couldn't find any. So I'm really not sure how it's being done, but it's being done. I know how some of it's being done. I know how some of the following on foot and on the road is being done. I don't know about the listening in. I'm sure there's many ways these days. But
now, when you say they're following you on the foot and on the road, how do you know how that's being done? What's your take on that, if you could elaborate, please?
I had mentioned this after it had gotten bad enough to some family members and to some friends, and they just kind of poo-pooed it and said, yeah, okay, you're imagining it, you're kind of bordering on paranoia with this stuff, and
And how many different family members used the P word, the paranoia word? How many people said that to you?
Pretty much all of them at first.
How many was that? 6, 60, 16?
Oh, I mentioned it, because it had gone on for a while, and I'd tried my, hardest to figure out what this is about, what was going on. And so I just couldn't keep quiet about it. I'd bring it up, some of the weird events, because I'd be at a friend's house or at a family member's house, and I'd get the drive-by, and I'd be the only one that would seem to notice. And I was like, does anyone else notice that on this usually lonely road, about 6 cars have driven by in about, as many minutes? And they'd be like, yeah, well, traffic does happen. And I'd be like...
and how many times did that happen, that sort of thing?
Oh, that happens frequently, and we'd get the neighborhood turned noticeably worse. There were people camping out in the woods. There were people, the sheriff then kind of acted like they were throwing them out, but all they wound up doing was moving into the trailer park below, and then you had the real traffic problem. There was traffic at all hours, and people would notice but not think that much of it, and so they thought it was just being sensitive or something. And
And what other sorts of things where people would use the P word, the paranoia word? What other sorts of examples?
Incidents downtown where I'd be like with a friend and I'd notice people staring, and he'd be like, well, I'm sorry, but I don't notice that. You're being oversensitive. You're being, you're kind of being weird. You're kind of paying too much attention to what they do. Why don't you just do your own thing? And, comments like that. And so I dropped it for a while. And then I noticed, police even following me. And I'd notice the Border Patrol here, who are already kind of notorious, following me. And would go, and park rangers, people from the neighborhood, just too many run-ins to be coincidence, and nobody else seemed to get it, and even if they did, they'd say it was a coincidence. So, it went on that way for a while, and then I came across a little paragraph in the local paper.
And what is the name of that paper, please?
Peninsula Daily News.
Peninsula Daily News. And approximately what date? Do you recall what date that might have been?
Let me see. I got the episode or the issue right here. It's the October 19th through 20th, 2012.
Okay.
And it's
but that October 19th through 20th of 2012. When did these run-ins happen with these people? Was that years ago, or was that?
This has been for years. But there was an incident here with a fugitive. He'd been on the lam, so-called, and I remember there were helicopters out, and there was a big to-do over it. And apparently they caught him, and they put a little, story about it in the paper. And right there, I noticed in one paragraph, they summed up pretty much what I've been telling people. They called it a partnership among law enforcement and area residents via social media such as Facebook, Nixle, the sheriff's office website, local news media, and citizens involved in local block watch programs was a major factor in the capture.
Now, you're reading this right now, and what is the date of the paper that you're reading that from?
The date of the paper is the October 19th through 20th. It's the Friday-Saturday edition of the Peninsula Daily News.
Okay, but these incidents that you talked about, did they just recently happen to you, or did they happen to you 4 years ago?
Oh, they've been happening to me for that many years. All these incidents where I'm being followed and all this stuff. It's pretty much every time I go out, I'll be followed by somebody. It doesn't have to always be the sheriff. It doesn't always have to be the border patrol. It's like neighborhood residents. It's people from, just all over. And they always let me know who they are, because when they're in the oncoming lane, they'll flash their brights at me and things of that nature. Sometimes they'll wander toward the center line and,
So you drive right now? You're still driving?
No, I'm just saying, no, right now I'm at home, but I'm saying when I do drive.
No, but you're presently in this time of your life, you do drive a vehicle.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Now, how did you come to how did you arrive at the conclusion that it was block watch, and at what time did you first state that?
Well, it was recently when this episode came out, because I had been, after...
So it had been happening to you for 4 years, and It wasn't until October of this year, and here we are in January of 2013. So it wasn't until October of last year, 2012, that you concluded that it was block watch.
I'd heard of things like block watches. I remember the now famous shooting with the I can't remember his name now, but there was a shooting involving a guy from the block watch who shot the guy that was harassing him or something recently.
Huh. Well, that's right. We wouldn't want to put their names on the audio.
No.
But I'm still want to get back to my question. You'd been harassed and followed and stalked for 4 years. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
But you didn't. At what point in that time frame of that 4 years did you come to the conclusion that it is block watch?
Well, when I read that, how they tied all those agencies and all these local citizens groups in and called it, and involved what they called block watch. I'd read about block watches, but until they mentioned it in the paper, it only been...
This October of 2012 in the Peninsula Daily News.
Yeah. It'd only been mentioned in, Nazi Germany or Communist Russia. They had what they called block captains and block watches, but nobody in the U.S. would ever call it that. And the paper just came right out and said it. But they said they were doing it, to catch bad guys. But,
Okay. Anything else you want to say on block watch before we move down the scripted list that I'm going to cover here?
Okay, that's pretty much it, except that, that was a good little summation of how they're doing this sort of thing, how they communicate with each other, how they're organized.
How do you think they communicate with each other, all these different institutions?
They have channels that only they can use. I think with some of the cell tower companies, and I think they also have, like I said, in the paper article, they said Facebook. They use they'll text each other, and they'll let each other know when the mark is coming. And then
okay. Now, how many marks do you think there are in your area up there in northern Washington, USA?
They've got me believe, or they want me to believe I'm the only one, but there's got to be more than me, but I don't know who they are, if they are,
Okay.
I know there was one.
Go ahead.
I know there was one guy that was in the Border Patrol that was blowing the whistle on him. I won't mention his name. That was a mistake I mentioned last time. But he was blowing the whistle on him for doing basically that kind of thing. They were driving around, wasting tax dollars, making work for themselves, because they went from, like, in 2004 Border Patrol to 40 plus here, and had a whole new multi-million-dollar facility built for them. And it was all based on some incident that happened down on the waterfront that the Port Authority took care of just fine, but apparently they used that as an excuse to do this. And he blew the whistle on them and said they were driving around, wasting, trying to get overtime and, blatantly wasting
work.
Yeah.
Okay. And where did you hear about that at, please?
That was also in the paper.
In this October 1920 in the Peninsula Daily News?
No, this was a different date. It was a few months before that.
Okay, so go ahead. You had been advised of the concept of Blockwatch in the Peninsula Daily News a few months before that.
Yeah, or at least, government agencies that were kind of growing out of control and doing things that weren't so on the up and up with taxpayer money.
Okay. Now I want to switch the subject here to a subject that I don't generally like talking about, but it is and I am interviewing you, the concept of satellites.
Okay.
What do you have to say about them, and how do you think they fit into this?
I think they definitely fit into how they can, or at least, make it easier for them to track. I know they have lots of, they probably have chips in vehicles, and at least the newer ones, so that I know they can keep track of each other.
But we're talking about the satellites. So how do you think the satellites fit into this?
I just think it must make them easier to surveil. And I mentioned that one that I've seen over this area that you said you'd seen too. That weird satellite that's stationary, or it just looks like it's too bright to be a star, but you'll watch it track across the sky and it'll stop in a certain spot.
Really? You can actually watch it moving and then poof, it stops, huh?
Mm-hmm. It'll stop in various spots in the sky. Sometimes they're different than others.
Now, how high up in the ground, from the ground, how high up do you think that thing is?
I have no idea. No, it's much bigger than it looks bigger because I think it's lower than a typical satellite, but I think it's way up. I think it's...
So it's not, you don't think it's in orbit. You think it's launched from here on Earth, or what? What's the story? What's your guess?
I honestly don't know, because I don't know that much about them, but it looks like it must be in the atmosphere instead of outside of it or something, or at least it must be a lot brighter or larger than a typical satellite.
Okay, but now what makes you think that satellite is zooming out on you? There must be thousands and thousands of people below you. Why you? What?
Oh, no, I don't know if it's zooming in or not. I just mentioned it because it was weird. It was something that was kind of an anomaly, and most people don't seem to notice it. So I don't know if it's surveilling or what, but it's certainly strange.
All right, so we'll put that in the strange department. I'm not sure why I wrote this, but you had said, how far do you live from the Strait of Juan de Fuca up there in northern Washington?
I probably live about a mile from it or so.
And how do you think that fits into what we're talking about?
Oh, I don't know.
That's fine.
Okay.
Okay. Next question: why do you think you were chosen as a target?
That is something I have almost no idea about, except maybe it's just a random thing, you know. Because everybody winds up pissing somebody off. It's impossible not to. So,
yeah.
Other than that, I'm not a terrorist. I'm not a VIP or a government agent or a corporate bigwig. I'm kind of, according to them, I would be a nobody. So, probably just a sucker they thought they could try and run surveillance on for their new grid they're building for the New World Order or something. I don't know.
Okay, now I'm walking on thin ice on this one, but so tell me to go jump in the lake if you want. But the next issue I had that I wanted to talk about was one time you talked about getting into a scuffle with a perp, and what do you want to say about that?
I'm still involved in the case, but so I can't get into too much detail. But I believe they probably set me up for it because I'd been surveilled pretty heavily. Because it has ebbs and flows. Some days are worse than others, and this was a particularly bad day. And I think they know they'd been keeping me up that night. And this guy just flicks me off at a bus stop as I'm driving by, and I stopped to ask him what was up with that. And I was still, I wasn't out of my head or anything. I just asked him what was up, and he starts grabbing his stuff and going for my truck. And I was like, wait, I don't give people rides, and I certainly don't give people rides to flick me off. And he's like, we can blah, blah, blah. And he just started getting my face, and
So you think it was a setup?
I do, and I don't think he expected it to be as bad for him as it turned out, because I went ahead and let him have it with an open palm strike. I didn't punch him with my fist, but it rang his bell because he started stumbling around. Then he took a swipe at me and knocked my glasses off, and then I went ahead and let him have it with the other hand and knocked him down in the ditch. And at that point, I decided to take off and think about this. I was going to report myself anyway because I knew I wouldn't get away, but I didn't have time to clear my head, and I'd been a rough day. And then that's when on the way back I was apprehended anyway within like 5 minutes.
Okay, now so somehow because you left the scene, you got you got blamed.
Yeah, and so this case is still pending. So
obviously your advice. You think the guy was provoking you, particularly you were driving by, and you think this guy was provoking you?
Yeah, I do, because I was, the only one at that time. I mean, he made very clear to, kind of stick his finger out. As I was driving by, I saw other traffic go by, and as I was coming by, he got my attention with it.
Yeah. Okay. So anybody who's listening, you can make your decision on whether you should get involved with people. I say you should not.
No.
Now, how long have you been targeted?
I think for at least 4 years that I noticed, and I think probably surveilled before that. Now that I know what.
Now, why do you think you were surveilled before that? What sorts of things happened before that made you think? Why do you think that?
Just because, some of the things they've done, some of the things they've mentioned, some of the people I've known that wound up being in on it, that knew me from way before this, or I mean that I've known them longer than 4 years. Like a friend that I went on a property deal with, he wound up screwing me over too, and that was kind of unexpected. I'd known him for decades, and he just upped and kind of left me in a lurch, and that was weird. I don't know if it's mind gun control on top of everything else, or if he was always a perp. But that would indicate that it goes back a long ways.
Okay. We talked earlier about air harassment. In other words, once you explain to people who are going to be listening to this recording, you have no clue what air harassment. Why don't you explain to them what that means and how it fits in your situation?
With me, it's not like jets or anything like that, but it is local helicopters occasionally, and it is local airplanes, like small Cessna types that'll wind up. Like I'll go on a hike, and I'll be into it about 5 minutes, and a flyover will come, and it'll kind of fly and track. In fact, I've had them circle over before, and I thought that was very strange, and it kind of made me uneasy, and you know. It's
now, how many times have you had this air harassment?
I've had it enough times to where it's obviously not every time, but I've had enough times to where it gets my attention. You know, it's like that's.
Now, is this just when you hike, or you're a hiker, right?
Usually when I'm out somewhere where they can't typically get me on foot or in a vehicle, so I'll do a little flyover. And I know the local sheriff. In fact, that brings another thing to mind, because when I was living with this friend of mine back in early 2000s, and on a piece of property that was way out in the middle of nowhere, he got a flyover. He was getting flyovers for like a week straight, and he was telling me that they were surveilling him, and I thought he was crazy. And like that same week, some sheriffs showed up and said they were on his property, and he was giving them the riot act, which I would do if they had done this too.
He was giving the sheriff the riot act.
Yeah, but I would have, tried to be a little more civil about it, because that's not the wisest thing to do. But he was, about being on his property, and they said, well, we saw an anomaly during a flyby that we think could have been pot plants and such. And they said, we don't have pot plants here. You're all blanked up, and you should, And it wound up being, they wound up getting on the property anyway and doing a big walkthrough and searching through everything, and illegal search, not seizure, but illegal search, Fourth Amendment violations, but they seem to be able to do it anyway. And they, of course, found nothing. But, they do fly over and they do surveil. They just didn't.
So, once again, how many times have they flown over?
Oh, that was back then, and with me, they fly over.
Back then, meaning 4 years ago?
Oh, that was even further back than that, and that just was something that popped into my mind.
How much further back, please?
That was probably about 2002.
Really?
Yeah. So,
okay, more than a decade.
Yeah, it was 11 years ago, yeah.
Where's this friend now?
He's down in the Philippines. He found himself a mail-order bride, apparently, so.
Okay. But once again, how many times have you been on the hiking trails that you've had?
Probably. Yeah, it's hard to say because I don't really count every time, but it's enough to where it's not every time, but it's enough to where it makes me pay attention. So it might be once every once out of every 10 times maybe, or maybe even actually a little more than that. It's just
so you must go hiking a lot then. How many times do you go hiking?
Oh, I'll do it like several times, maybe once every 2 days or so, 3 days, just to run out.
Now, some people are going to be sitting there listening to this recording and say, well, this guy is a pot grower. He's got some stuff out there. I'm sorry. I'm just asking what they're thinking. What do you have to say to that, though, please?
Yeah, that's fine. No, I have to run off some steam, or I'll go, I'll get a little batty. They know I'm not growing anything anyway, because a lot of this is DNR land that I wind up on, or parkland, and if, they'd find it if I was growing anything, so,
And what does PNR mean, please?
Oh, DNR, Department of Natural Resources.
Okay.
I kind of have taken on the role of being they've got it to where they've got to some of my former employers, and I'm out of work right now. So if anybody asks, I just tell them I'm an activist. I'm out there on the land looking at what they're doing, and I don't think they like it too much. So
now, we talked about brighting by cars. How often does that happen? And you're still driving, right?
Right.
I'm just curious. How often does that happen? Is it one car? Is it many cars? Why don't you explain that concept to people?
It'll be like in the oncoming lane as I'm driving. There'll be a group of anywhere from maybe 5 to 10 cars in a little formation, kind of a convoy. As they're passing by or coming up to you, they'll hit their brights, or their brights will already be on.
10 cars in a row, 5 cars in a row. Each one of them will bright you, or just the first car, or what?
Like 2 or 3 out of it. And so you're thinking, well, if I turn my brights on, am I going to get somebody that's not in on this? But I think the whole group is probably in on it, but they just, trying to make it look like...
But, 10 cars, that just sounds like life in the big city. Is this something that happens every time you're driving down the road? Do you have the kind of a vehicle that has particularly bright halogen lights, or what? What do you say to that?
No, I just say that my truck is like an 87 Ford. It's, there's nothing unusual about it. It's just, it's a tactic they use. It's, and this area is not large, but again, it can be any time of the day. There'll be convoys of these people out there, which means they're getting paid to do nothing but follow and harass. So.
And how often does this happen? Go ahead.
This happens particularly often. This is almost every time I go out, and it doesn't matter when. There'll be something like that, or I'll be at a gas station, and it'll suddenly be full of people. I'll try to pick times purposefully that I think, or I used to. Now I know it's a given. They're going to be out no matter what. But it'll be 10 in the morning or something, and there'll be people taking up most of the spots, or there'll be people, as I'm gassing up, they'll drive by real obviously, and they'll be on their phone. They'll stop right next to me, and they'll just sit there on their phone, and, like they're just kind of a rude presence everywhere I go.
Okay, now I want to talk a little bit more about I think I got the handle on the gas station thing. I just want to talk about being out on the road. How often do you go out? How long has this been going on? How many years has it been occurring? That sort of thing. Could you please talk about that a bit?
Yeah, that part's been at least probably 3 or 4 years, and it's most of the time when I go out, at least somebody, in the daytime will hit their brights, or even at night will hit their brights, or they'll come up on your back. They'll be able to speed with impunity. Cops won't pull them over if they're out, And they'll.
How do you think the cops know not to pull them over?
I think that's the block watch in action again. I think, they radio ahead. They know they got the perp. They know that they're,
So you're saying that the cops know not to pull them over, and this has been going on for years.
Oh yeah,
you've been tailed, or is that what you're saying? Why don't you talk about that just a little more? And I'm not trying to be too much of a pill. I just want to hear you talk about it.
Okay, yeah, that's they just they can box you in, they can bright you, they can speed by you just to get in your way. Just to suddenly pull back into your lane. If I'm dawdling along in the slow lane, just to try to maintain the speed limit, they'll race up sometimes, or they'll either sit right next to you to make sure they're right there, or they'll get in, pull into your lane, and then slow down
in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
And this has been going on for how many years? Do you guess?
Like I said, about 3 or 4 with this sort of thing.
And how many cars are typically in on this?
Oh man, it must be with all the oncoming cars involved, and then the ones in your own lane and all this, and as many, it's got to be hundreds.
Hundreds of people, hundreds
Maybe they're
of vehicles.
Making it look like that, but I know that the Border Patrol alone is 40. I know the law enforcement is.
You think the Border Patrol's in on it?
Oh yeah. they've wound up everywhere I go too. They'll wind up.
The border. Are you saying the border? You think the border patrol is in on the vehicle surveillance and the mobbing?
I do. Like I said, I think that they've already been taken to task and put in the paper over wasting money and resources. They know where they can find illegal Mexicans and people crossing the border. They don't even bother generally with that sort of thing. They surveil citizens. So, they were going to try and have a checkpoint set up here where they would check the buses, and you couldn't get on buses without being checked, and you couldn't get, and it's like, kind of common sense to,
Were these buses going across over to Canada, or what?
No, these were transit buses. These were city buses.
Did they frisk people, or?
They were just going to check papers and things like this, and people put up enough of a fuss to where they had to cancel that, but now they just shifted into a different form.
And this is something that you read in the paper?
Yeah, it's
okay. Now, we talked earlier, once again, this is a totally scripted conversation that PA and I are having, but we talked earlier about what I called directed conversation. Could you explain in your own words what that means?
Yeah, they'll take something personal that you've been talking about with somebody, like in your own home or on your phone or something of that nature, and they'll pick out little phrases that you're either talking about or just something that seems to let you know that they've heard somehow, and it's unnerving and it's weird and it's
Now, when you say they take something like that, I get where they got it, but where would they say this?
Oh, they would
when
say
you're out on,
right in a store or something, or at like generally stores, restaurants, somewhere out in the public, at a gas station when they're busy taking up space, when their credit card has a problem,
So things that you said in the privacy of your own home on a phone conversation, for example, they would say that to you when you're out and about. Now, how often has this happened, and how often does this happen, please?
This has happened fairly often. I've even had, like I said, family members, like at Christmas, where there's a family get-together, there was some directed conversations by them where, I don't talk to them too often. It's like a yearly thing. They're extended family, and they will have a conversation as though they had heard what you said. And
so how do you think somebody led them onto it and told them to do it?
I think so, yeah. I think they've been gotten to by whoever it is. And I think they're kind of giddy about it. They kind of like, it's like I mentioned earlier, it's for kind of shallow dumbasses that like to be in on, kind of like a high school bully project or something.
Okay, now this directed conversation, how long has this been going on, please?
Probably about as long as the rest of it.
Are we talking about 4 years?
Yeah, since I really started noticing it. And back then it wasn't as involved. It didn't seem to have the family members, at least. So now that's more recent, but not that much more recent. And I don't know, maybe they were back then, but they've only recently really gotten obvious about it to where they act like they want me to know.
So they want you to know you're being surveilled or harassed, and the family members, and you said extended family members, are actively participating in that harassment.
I do believe so, yeah.
And on how many occasions, give or take, has the active participation of extended family members taken place?
Oh, I don't see them that often. So it's pretty much like I got invited to a job because they know I've been out of work for a while by a step-uncle, for example. And when on the job, he had a friend of his come over, and they started having one of these directed conversations. And they'd
friend, this guy and his friend.
Yeah. And then we went out to eat. He bought lunch, so it seems like a nice gesture. But everyone at the restaurant were having weird conversations, and there was a stare thing too. That's another aspect I didn't mention. There's a lot of staring, like a community stare campaign. So they'll be rude and act strange and stare at you, and they don't seem to feel the least bit weird about doing it.
And how many people would be in on this? How many people would be doing it, and how often does it happen, please?
That happens about the same as everything else. It's just, all...
Like once every year, once every 6 months, every month, once a week? I'm just asking how...
The stare campaign, the family members, the extended family members, I don't see that often, but when I see them, it's every time. So, I'll see them like once a month or something, and so they'll do this kind of garbage then. But the stare campaign is every day that somebody will be somewhere, on a street corner or, at a store, and they'll just stare and gawk at you. Or they'll smirk. There's a lot of that, too. Like they're in on some private joke about you.
So how many people do you think are in on this? The whole thing, the whole ball of wax in the last couple of months, 3 months?
I know it's made to look like it's bigger than it is, but to me it looks pretty damn big. It looks like the whole town, and into the next town. And I mean, it seems like it couldn't be that big, but it is.
But I mean, you're saying that everybody in town, or is it every 100th person, or what say they?
It looks, like hundreds are involved. To me, now I don't know if I know they can plant one in amongst the crowd, and then they'll get people talking with them, and maybe to try to make it look bigger than it is. But it still looks big to me. It looks like there must be, 300 or 400 or something.
Okay. Now, we've been on about 40 minutes, and I'm getting ready to end it off here, but I wanted to know what else you have to say. What do you think we didn't cover? What do you want to cover? Because this will be the one and only, or the second, and the one that we keep. What do you want to say?
Just to, a heads up on anybody listening who might be new to it, that, to hear the experiences I've had and that it might cue you in on what's going on and how they might be doing it, with the block watch and all this, and contacting people through texting and Facebook and probably other means too.
When you say texting, you're talking about on their phones, on their cell phones, which probably have some type of text messaging.
Right. And they may even have special government apps. I don't know. But around here we got runaway agencies, and even the papers admitted it, and they're kind of in on it. So.
Now, what makes you think the papers are in on it?
Well, they admitted it in the block watch section there. They said, where they were talking about the block watch, they said the local news media, they mentioned themselves being in on this, but they put a good spin on it. They said, we're watching out for the bad guys, we're watching.
And was this at October, what was the date of, or was it some other date? Let's get the date of that article.
Yeah, that was the October 19th.
And 20th in the Peninsula Daily News.
Mm-hmm.
And what was the title of that article, please?
Let's see. Police nab PA fugitive.
Okay, police nab PA fugitive for PA for Port Angeles, and that's in the Peninsula Daily News on, you said it was October 19th and 20th of 2012.
Yep, correct.
Okay, so that'll give somebody something to refer to. Now, what else do you want to say that would be of importance to people listening to this, please?
Other than that, like I said, I don't have a lot of advice as to what to do about it yet. Hopefully, we're enough people calling in, putting their heads together, and calling enough attention to it maybe other shows starting too. I know that there was Jesse Ventura, and he kind of called some attention to, maybe it wasn't spot on what we're dealing with, but if there's enough, maybe you can make people accountable. Other than that, I don't really have a lot of advice because I'm still dealing with it myself.
Okay, once again, my name is Chuck, and this is TalkShoe show number 120297. That's talkshoe.com, and this call is in the public domain, so you may use it as you see fit, and I encourage that. And that's good, and you don't have to advise anybody that you're doing it. PA, thank you for coming here. I'm looking for one last piece, one last one-liner. I always try to close with an open one-liner. What do you have to say? The mic is yours.
A one-liner, huh?
Yeah, no, just anything you want to say.
Watch your backs and take care of yourselves.
Okay. All right. And then that will be the end of this recording. And then what I'm going to do, let me just hit end here, and then I'm just going to have a chat. And I'm going to open up the chat room. Thanks again, PA.
Okay.